when we have this house, I want to live in the room with a parrot. And it was completely heartbreaking. I think about that kid often. I really hope he's doing well. But it was like a little, I don't know, just a shaft, a real golden light on my life, that meeting.
So these are species that you love, particularly the parrots. What is it that frustrates you about swifts?
Oh, swifts are a nightmare. I mean, swifts are like a kind of the animal for me in many ways. You have swifts, where you are, and the ones here, when I was a kid, I used to be kind of desperate to see them close up. They never land. They only land really when they're breeding, and they breed in rooftops in little dark spaces. And they were too fast to watch through binoculars. So they look like these little black crosses screaming across the sky, like they always look a bit like sort of angels or something, kind of, sort of fairly divine. And I try and follow them and get more and more frustrated. And they found out these most incredible things about Switzerland. Every night these birds, if they're not sitting on eggs, they go higher and higher and higher in these big flocks until they disappear from view. And they used to think they went up there to sleep. And it turns out that's not what they're doing. They go up there every dawn and they go up there every dusk, and they hit the apex of their flights at precisely the point of nautical twilight. And scientists have worked out that why they're doing this is to orient themselves. So at that height, they can see for over 100 miles. They can see clouds on the horizon. They can see the patterns of the stars. They can see the patterns of polarized light in the atmosphere, so they can navigate and work out where they are. And they can assess temperature. Basically they are just taking time to predict what the weather will be like and where they're going to go next. And they do it communally. And working that out was, when I read this scientific paper about it, it was like one of those moments where you sort of realize that we so often think of science as subtracting beauty and magic from the world, but actually it's just providing us with these incredible things. And I just kept thinking about how, it's kind of something we should all think about. If we're not occupied with other things, maybe we should take time every so often to try and think more clearly about where we're going. And I wrote that before COVID. And now when I read it again, and I look at that bit at the end about swifts kind of looking out for dark clouds on the horizon, it's all I can think about. It was weirdly a prophetic piece. And, I wish we'd looked out harder for it coming.
I'm talking to Helen Macdonald, author of Vesper Flights. Helen, deer, again, you're a champion for deer. They surprise and they delight you, and you're trying very hard to help us understand deer better because human ignorance is impacting on them.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about deer that is always astonishing me is that they are, probably the most dangerous animal out there. They kill more people by running into cars than, it's an astonishing number of people. Yeah, I always did this thing with deer where I kind of love to see them because I didn't know much about them, and I kind of refused to find out much about them because they seemed kind of magical to me. I used to be surprised by their presence. I used to love seeing them kind of, cantering across fields. And I guess this whole piece is about how this particular essay about deer is about how it's a trade-off. If you don't know much about an animal, you can use it as a kind of mystical or a sort of wondrous symbol that, in your life. But that's a kind of disservice to the animal. I think, there's a lot of talk these days about how natural history as a subject is something that's not really taught anymore. And I think that's really important to kind of work on. I think, the more you know about animals, the more in place you are in the world. So this whole piece is about deer collisions and how it really spurred me to think more, find out more about deer. And it also involved me watching, much to my horror, a YouTube supercut of deer collisions, which is one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen, with all these commentators sort of saying underneath, this is hysterically funny. And I'm thinking, no, he isn't. In fact, I got so upset, my parrot ran across the table and snuggled up to my hand to comfort me. It was a really,
Oh,
really, really quite a brutal thing to watch.
but
But yeah, deer are cool.
they are cool. I mean, I mean, the fact is that wild animals don't understand roads and the danger of
Yeah.
cars, and we have signs here. Penguins are particularly vulnerable,
Are
even
you there,
kiwi,
Brian?
at night on our roads, and you know if there's a
Hello,
collision there,
Brian.
who's going to lose. But I remember being in India a few years ago, and they have a huge issue. I mean, we're talking, big animals, but also small, and they're trying to spend a lot of money building underpasses under motorways that transect habitats, which is great. But what's happening is that poachers now know where to go to get them because they're in this one small areas. So,
Right.
I mean, this is our issue, isn't it? We try and help, but the longer term consequences make things really difficult sometimes to help. And you explore this in your collections. This complicated area of trying to do our best and reduce the number of future extinctions.
Hi, Briar. It's Claire in
Yeah, I mean
Wellington.
that
How are
is something
you?
that again does give me hope.
Good, good,
There are
thanks.
so many
We've just been
people working
debating, is it
flat
Laurie or
out
Lowry?
to improve
Laurie, I
matters,
thought so.
and there's a lot of talk at the moment about us
Okay.
living in the
Hey,
Anthropocene. There's
the
no
reading
part of the world
today
that is
is
touched by
14 and a
human
half minutes,
activities
so that
now.
means
So
we'll need
it's not like
to
in many
be
ways, it's
wrapping
not
up
as
with
if
you
we are
at
trying to preserve
2:45.
pristine
All right,
ecosystems
so
and
if
the
you can
animals
just keep
within
an
them.
eye
We
on the
have to work
clock
with these
and don't
damaged
go beyond
ecosystems and try
2:45.
and kind of
Lovely. Thanks, Briar.
either
Stand by.
rewild or work with what we have. And that's where we need the science. We need the science to give us hard data on how to manage populations and what to do. But the book also says that I think we need to pay much more attention to the emotional and cultural aspects of animals. None of us is going to care about um, a natural world that we don't know or have any kind of emotional investment in. So I hope my book is there are many, many writers who are very polemical about nature and they like to shout at people about what to do. I'm not very good at that. What I want to do is kind of raise my hand out with something precious on it and say, look at this, look at a forest, what underneath the ground, there is this, incredibly complex system of, for example, kind of fungal threads that link together trees and other plants and funguses, and there's kind of they swap water and minerals, and they almost communicate through it. There's so much around us. The scale of the natural world is so inhuman and so dizzying. Just knowing that, I think, is something that has conservation import and also is good for us.
In your chapter Rescue, you say that rehabbers are often criticised for being too sentimental and their work dismissed as acts of compassion for individual animals with little or no conservation benefit. I mean, there have been some people who've criticised New Zealand for spending many millions of dollars on trying to save the kakapo, which is another unlikely bird, the world's largest parrot. And we've had successes, and the nation kind of takes a thrill from that. But others looking from the outside going, well, you're crazy. It's not designed to survive in the modern world. You're better to spend that money elsewhere. And again, it's complicated.
Yeah, I don't know. Kakapos are so cool, though. I mean, they're just the coolest parrots, aren't
Cool.
they? They smell and they make extraordinary noises. And yeah, no, I mean, I think something with the kakapo. I mean, it's not just preserving that, that idiosyncratic and unique creature. It's preserving the habitat they live in. It's so many more things than just saying this animal needs to survive. But this animal does need to survive. Those creatures. I mean, I have friends who know nothing about the natural world, but have shared the famous video of a kakapo mating with a cameraman's head with me
Yeah, that's
several
well
times.
known. Very painful.
Exactly.
Not to be recommended.
So yeah, no, I'm definitely on the side of the kakapo, and also, I just love the familiarity and love which is so clearly apparent in the way that those birds are talked about. It's a kind of model for empathy and love, and I think we just need more of that everywhere, not just in our relationship with nature.
I love this line from your essay, Lost But Catching Up. Fate saw fit to make me allergic to horses, dogs and foxes. That's rather unfortunate for your line of work, Helen.
I'm a disaster with mammals, honestly. You put me anywhere near anything with fur and I start sneezing. In fact, I was a really sickly child. I had terrible respiratory problems when I was in asthma when I was a kid, and then the dog died and I was suddenly fine. So luckily I'm okay with feathers. But yeah, mammals, I'm afraid, only at arm's length. It's terribly sad. I'd love to have a dog, but that's not really possible for me.
You reflect on modern life, tall buildings, high rises. What did you find in your research into the impact of these ultra tall buildings in many parts of the world and their impact particularly for birds?
This was one of the coolest things I've ever done, actually. I was commissioned by the New York Times Magazine to write about the impact of, they did a whole issue on buildings in New York that were over 800 foot high. There's a lot of these super tall buildings appearing. And they said, we want one on nature. And I thought, well, what is there up there? Nothing, So I did some research and my jaw dropped. I was gobsmacked. There.
Kia ora mai tātou. Te tuatahi me tima, ta marunga I te pono me te tika. Nā reira, ko te tūrama kei runga, ko te tūrama e rangi, ko te tūrama mō tangaro mō rangi nui e tūnei. te pūpuketanga ro, te māharatanga ro, te hiringa te ata mai, te hiringa o ngākau o tāngata. Ka wete wetea, ka taratara ki te ata ura, ki te ata hana, ki te ata kōrero, ki te ata wānanga. Te huhuki kei runga, te huhuki e rangi, te huhuki runga tangata matua. He wakatau e ke he wakatau i ko tūkorongo, ki te whai au ki te ao mārama. E rongo waka irihi aki ki runga kia tīna, tīna. Haumi e hui e. Te tuatahi nei rā nā toku mihi atu kia koutou katoa kua rarau mai i tēnei rangi. Kua rarau mai mararo te marumaru o ngā maunga, a rā ko puke ātua ki te rāwhiti, ko puke āriki ki te hauāuru, ki te taha nei o ngā waituku kiri o tātou o te atiawa, a rā ko waiwhetū ko te awa kairangi, o te anō rā ki te taha o tō tātou nei moana a te whanganui ātara. Haere, haere, haere mai nei rā, ki roto i tēnei ātea o nuku tefa tefa. Te whare pātaka whakairo o te kingitanga, he tukuna tu ngā mihi kia koutou katoa. O te anō rā ki a koe e te minita, nau mai, hara mai, era rau i wainganui a tātou o te atiawa, era rau mai rā i wainganui a tātou a te awa kairangi, a te kaunihera o te awa kairangi ki tai. O te anō rā ki ngā kaunihera katoa kua tatu mai i tēnei rangi, tēnei nā taku mihi atu kia koutou. Nau mai, hara mai, whakatau mai rā. Kia ora everyone and welcome to this auspicious event. Here today on the ātea of Nuku Tefa Tefa. We are privileged to have this beautiful pātaka whakairo here in the Dowse. And I think it symbolises quite significant elements. First, this pātaka whakairo was built by us, by Te Atiawa, commissioned by Te Atiawa, as our recognition and our symbolism and our connection to the kingitanga movement. In this pātaka whakairo stores the dreams and hopes of Te Atiawa. It also stores the dreams and hopes of the kingitanga. And of course, we have here the minister who has strong connections to that movement and strong whakapapa connections into Waikato Tainui. But more than that, Nuku Tefa Tefa symbolises the dreams and hopes for all of us as one country, as one people. So it is incredibly important and poignant that we have this event here in front of Nuku Tefa Tefa. So with that, I would like to pass over the... actually, before I do that, I just need to do some health and safety elements. Otherwise, I will get told off. If there is a fire, we head out the same entrance that we came in, and we gather out the front there by the car park. So with that done, short and sweet, I'm going to pass it over to our Mayor, Campbell Barry of Hutt City Council. Kia ora, Mayor Campbell Barry.
Tuia e runga, tuia e raro, tuia e roto, tuia e waho, tuia te here, tangata e painei. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I draw from above, from below, from within and without, to bind together all people gathered here today. I greet you all. I'd like to acknowledge the Minister of Local Government, the Honourable Nanaia Mahuta, for being here today. Our iwi partners, Te Atiawa Taranaki Whānui and Ngāti Toa, mayors and councillors from across the region, council staff, Local Government New Zealand, Taitu Ara, NGOs, government organisations, and of course, the Dowse. I want to first take a moment to acknowledge the significance of where we stand right now, as was just covered by Kara. Nuku Tefa Tefa behind me embodies why we're all here. This pātaka is not just a storehouse, it's a space that brings people together and builds relationships from within. A large part of the story of Nuku Tefa Tefa stems from the relationship between the Māori leader Witako Ngātata and the Pākehā family, the Beethams. After the Beethams bought land off Ngātata, it was agreed that Nuku Tefa Tefa would be cared for by the Beethams. Here the promise of kaitiakitanga was maintained for well over 100 years, and they looked after the pātaka until it was gifted back to Te Atiawa and returned home to Te Awa Kairangi. The story symbolises partnership between Māori and Pākehā and shows that our future will be strong as long as we look out for each other, and care for our land. Partnerships like this should be at the heart of everything we do, whether this be our foundational partnerships with our mana whenua or the partnerships we form with central government, local organisations and our local people. We exist fundamentally, in my view, to improve the well-being of our people in our communities and to make sure that every single person has the opportunity to thrive, whether that be in our cities, our districts or our regions. That's why it was particularly important, and I'd like to acknowledge you, Minister, for reintroducing the Wellbeings to the Local Government Act. Wellbeing is central to the work that we do and allows us to focus on what is truly the most important thing in the world, the people. While we're pretty clear on the opportunities and the promise of our sector, we need to be honest about the challenges we face and how we respond, and exciting conversations that do need to happen, not just for now, but for future generations. Thank you again for coming to Lower Hutt today. It is very special to host you in such a special place for us, and we do look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Introduce the 4 well-beings into the purpose of local government. Actually, at the time when I did that, many in the local government sector, look, this is what we do, this is our bread and butter, this is what we're all about, and I knew that. The purpose of local government is to enable democratic local decision-making and action by and on behalf of communities, and to promote the social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being of communities. The reform work already underway and calls from the sector to modernise the legislative framework and supports to enable local government to contribute to well-being outcomes. There are also the Resource Management Act reforms, which significantly align to the future for the local government review. Can I acknowledge LGNZ, Stuart, your briefing to the incoming government from late last year noted that, quote, in recognising the risks that the various independent legislative reforms underway will have on the day-to-day operations of local government, it is also important to generations. I'm appreciative of the ongoing work and engagement local government is committing to this complex and important task. When councillors have talked to me about all this, they've said, if you proceed with these reforms, then what are we going to be left with doing? And that's a fair question. What is left if water and resource management is delivered by someone else? Another question, a fair one. But I think that there is a better way to put the questions. What could we be? What could we achieve if we start to think differently about how we... The deliverables for this review include an interim report by September this year, a draft report by September 2022, and a final report by April 2023. No pressure. As you can see, the timing and approach has been mapped out to enable a serious consideration of the review findings to inform parliamentarians about the sector and stakeholder views of what the future should look like. If we've done this right, then we should put urgency across the whole of Parliament to pick up the findings of the various reports, enterprise types of opportunities and new ways of working with community. But there's so much more within the skill set of this particular panel. I've also reserved the opportunity to appoint one other, should it be required. Should is the main word. It may not need to be. They bring a wealth of complementary specialist skills and experience to deliver this important work. I've also, and this is a unique opportunity for the sector and for Aotearoa New Zealand as a whole. And we need to make sure that we seize this moment. Engagement through this process will be robust and comprehensive. We need to hear from iwi, communities, businesses, organisations and all parts of the local government sector, especially community. I'm seeking your engagement with the panel to help refine and lead thinking about what the priority issues are. Let's make that roadmap work for the long term. Again, I acknowledge local government's ongoing engagement and work as we to provide for the next season. So always planning forward, paying forward, thinking about how our children will sustain themselves. And I ask that that thinking be applied to the way in which we approach the future for local government. If there's nothing else that I do as Minister of Local Government, it will be this. This is the reason why I came asked to be the Minister of Local Government, because I knew that by inserting the wellbeings and by providing support to the sector to vision out what the future could look like, we're all better for it. And may your travelling companion or your working companion always be the spirit of peace. Nō reira, kia koe, kia tata katoa, tēnā koutou.
Kia ora mai tātou. So it's my role as MC to keep things flowing. And I just wanted to know, I just received a text from my sister who's watching this on live stream, and she said, "Damn, Whainanai is really awesome." So
I'm not sure if you remember that, but my ears pricked up when I saw that. And that really started to begin this conversation about not so much filling the gap, but what could the future for local government actually look like. And so here we are today with an announcement which has been clearly articulated, which I do not have to repeat. But what I can say is this is not a surprise to our sector. In fact, at the last quarter of last year, when we do our rounds of our zones from the far north down to the deep south, and Chatham Islands is included as well, we raised this issue that this conversation is coming. And in the first quarter of this year, again, when we did our rounds around New Zealand, we said it's imminent, it's nearly there. And so today, it has actually arrived, Minister, and we're delighted it has arrived. For my sins, I was around in 1989 as a very young sense. So what I'm really here to say is that LGNZ, and I believe I can speak on behalf of all of our sector, is actually thrilled that we're going to have a look under the bonnet again to make sure that we have the right engine to move not just the local government sector forward, but the community forward, because this is ultimately always about the community. And in New Zealand we have two tiers, obviously, of government. We have central government and local government. And this is a huge opportunity for us to actually work together, particularly in the delivery space, to our community, who both sectors represent and want to do the very best for. And over the last 30 years, there's been more and more activities placed on local government, and that's not a bad thing, but it's been somewhat in silos. And what we are seeing as we look ahead, again, Chairman Jim, no pressure, if I could look ahead for a vision, I could see both sectors of government actually working together in reality, particularly in the delivery space, through a whole range of activities, more effectively, more efficiently, and as I say, ultimately serving the current and future generations of this country. It's a wonderful opportunity. It's a wonderful opportunity. It doesn't come along that often.
leading this review, it's a big ask. So I would like to welcome the now chair of the Future for Local Government panel, Jim Palmer. Kia ora, nau mai, hara mai.
Ena mana, ena reo, ena iwi, e rangatira mā, ena iwi, hui hui mai nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Partnerships between mana whenua, central and local government. This partnership needs to provide for social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being of our people and for seamless service delivery in our communities. We will be seeking ways to ensure that the local government system embodies the treaty partnership. To achieve this, we'll be investigating and making recommendations on the role and representation of iwi Māori in local government. We will be asking the Productivity Commission's report on local government funding and financing, the Justice Committee's recommendations regarding local elections as examples, and there's plenty of other valuable resources that we can draw on. It'll be important to hit the ground running, no pressure, particularly as we look to deliver an interim report in September this year. While my fellow panel members and I will need to work through the shape of that interim report, I note that it will signal the probable direction of our work and the next key steps. But this is just the first deliverable. We then have a major milestone to meet in September next year. Following extensive community engagement, we'll provide a draft report and recommendations for public consultation. Following the analysis of submissions, we will receive during the consultation period, we'll present our final report to you, Minister, and to Local Government New Zealand by 30 April 2023. Again, Minister, it's an absolute honour to be asked to conduct this work and be given the freedom to explore the future for local government so that we can ensure it continues to support and improve the well-being of our communities. On behalf of my panel colleagues,
globally, nationally and locally, era-scale change as we move to different energy sources, to take much greater care of how we use land and natural resources. We need to reduce our waste and protect the environment that sustains us, whilst also facing the automation of most routine work. This means that everything will need to be done differently. Where and how people live, how and where work happens, how people travel, how food is supplied, how learning happens. Whilst this is a global challenge requiring international action and a national challenge requiring central government to create national and local incentives, the powers and funding to support the urgently needed change, above all, it's a community challenge. Community by community, how and where we live and work and learn and connect is where impacts will hit home and where doing differently will be felt. And local government has a pivotal role in supporting our people to make those transitions. We know that in doing that, we must be deliberate about those changes, that we must also put equity at the forefront of the changes we go through. Because we need to make change on every front, we have an opportunity and responsibility to build pathways that create new futures for our communities. To do that, we need new systems which are grounded in concepts such as ora, meaning that they are inherent power within every corner of our community, and ensure that the system reflects us and serves us, all of us. We can change the dial through meaningful partnerships, whether that's forming co-governance relationships with iwi or strategic alliances with the voluntary sector, NGOs and key commercial partners. And as local government, we have to meet our partners where they are, and we have to rise to the occasion as one public sector enabled by the appropriate powers and funding tools necessary to change that dial. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou tātou.
Well, how do you top that? I guess it's incumbent on everyone and all of us to move forward and challenge and change the dial. So that was the key message that I took from that. So that concludes our speeches and our formal part of this morning. I would like to thank you all for attending today and being here on the Aotea of Nuku Tefa Tefa. And I would like to invite you all to a morning tea in James Co, just next door. But before we do that, I'll close us off with a karakia, and that'll be the conclusion of our session this morning. So kia ora mai tātou. Unuhia, unuhia, unuhia kia wātea, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua ki te ratakatū. Koia rā e rongo wakairihi a ki kirunga, kia wātea, ai rā, ko wātea, rire rire, hau, pai mā rire. Kia ora everyone.